Why should Americans care about what happens in a jungle laboratory in Peru?
We're having people die of overdose. We're having people get in horrific car accidents while they're high. Countless hours lost in productivity at a time when our growth is at a snail's pace as it is already. So why should we care? We should care because it impacts our lives in a very, very big way.
We flew to Washington, D.C. to speak with Congressman Matt Salmon, chairman of the Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on the Western Hemisphere, about the importance of fighting a drug war beyond our borders. So by some estimates, we've spent, say over the last 3 decades, up to perhaps $1 trillion actually fighting the war on drugs.
Right.
And yet it doesn't seem to have done a whole lot to stem the flow of drugs into this country. Should we be thinking more about the demand side? Should we double down?
We always have to constantly reassess if what we're doing is working. I met with the president of Honduras in Honduras and his entire cabinet and the president of Guatemala. They all say the same thing. If you guys didn't have the demand, we wouldn't have the supply. We're not consuming this stuff.
Do you think eradication is the key?
Well, interdiction is always going to be important. I think beefing up our borders is a big part of it. We know that a lot of drugs are still slipping through. This is not a Democrat problem. This is not a Republican problem. This is an American problem. We've got to have an all-hands-on-deck attitude, but make sure that, especially from the taxpayer point of view, that we're spending our money wisely.
If we're going to have a successful offensive, we need more money. Consequently, I'm asking the Congress for $155 million in new funds.
Fast forward from the 1970s to today, and many politicians are in effect continuing Nixon's war on drugs. This year alone, the U.S. will contribute $100 million in direct support to help Peru fight their drug war. But it's a strategy that's going to fail, according to Ethan Nadelman, head of the Drug Policy Alliance, who's working for an end to the drug war.
We've spent roughly over $1 trillion since Nixon first declared the war on drugs 40-odd years ago. It turns out that in terms of reducing cocaine, $1 invested in drug treatment gets you 25 times as much return as spending it on source control in a place like Peru. So the greatest waste of the taxpayers' money is whatever we're doing to try to push the coca growing from Peru to Bolivia to Colombia to somewhere else. People want to beat up on the druggies and the gangsters and the junkies, but dollar for dollar, we'll get a lot more in terms of public health and public safety by investing in helping people than we will in punishing them, locking them up, and terrorizing them. The global market in cocaine is essentially a global commodities market, just like the commodities markets in coffee and tea and so many other products, right? Where there is a demand, there will be a supply.
For the first time in the 40-year-old war on drugs, a significant chorus of voices is questioning whether the entire system is working.
Stop the war on drugs, and let's be more constructive in trying to reduce the consumption.
Recently, a group of former world leaders joined together to call for an unprecedented end to the global war on drugs. But despite this rhetorical shift, the strategy hasn't really changed since Nixon, and the primary approach to stemming the flow of narcotics is doing what we did in Colombia: sending troops, sending money, and fighting drugs with cops and soldiers both at home and abroad. And that effort is to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. So while the money to fight narcotics continues to flow from the US to Latin America, the drugs continue to move from Peru to the world.
The remarkable absence of strategic thinking on the part of U.S. foreign policymakers when it comes to international drug control has been one of the more astounding failures of U.S. diplomacy over the last 40 years.
Despite the staggering cost of the drug war and the debatable efficacy, politicians continue to argue that the fight against drugs is necessary and just.
The United States, as Ronald Reagan says, has always been that shining city on a hill. We stand for something better. And as long as that kind of poison is coming into our communities and ruining our children's lives, I think we have a moral obligation as leaders to do everything within our power to try to change that course of human events.
Peru, as the new epicenter of cocaine production, runs the risk of becoming the next great narco state. From the coca fields of the Bray to the clandestine labs of Lima to the foreign traffickers stuck in limbo, the cocaine trade has permeated nearly every aspect of Peruvian society. This billion-dollar trade is supporting everyone from the coca farmer to government officials. And that, despite the words of politicians and the weight of the world's counter-drug efforts, is why Peru is the new king of cocaine.